In this case study, I'm going to show you how I helped my client get page one rankings in the incredibly competitive sports betting niche by building them a custom internal dashboard that totally streamlined their marketing operations and turned a very chaotic, jumbled mess into a smooth, efficient, and scalable marketing machine. This client was building a large private blog network with over 150 domains to improve their SEO. And if you don't know what a private blog network is, it's just an SEO strategy that consists of buying, managing, and maintaining hundreds of different websites at the same time. Please don't get hung up on this specific example. What's really important to understand is that any marketing operation that has repeatable processes or multiple team members or complex interconnected workflows is going to face the same operational challenges that I solved for this client. So when I started working with this client, I immediately realized that their main problem was that they were trying to manage this incredibly complex workflow using just a bunch of different spreadsheets, which is kind of like using an abacus to launch a spaceship. Sure, technically it can do math, but it was really never designed for that level of complexity. So let me walk you through their workflow from a day-to-day basis to give you an idea of what we did here. Step one was acquiring domains. To run the network, this client needed to constantly be purchasing newly expired domain names, and then they had to store crucial information like their registration credentials, the renewal dates, etc. Step two was technical setup. Each of these domains then needed to have their hosting configured, WordPress had to be installed, we had to set up themes and create basic pages, so on and so forth. Step three was planning the content for each one of these websites. What is each one going to be about? What are the different keywords and the different publishing schedules? All of this had to be mapped out across the entire network. Step four was link building. We had to strategically build links between these newly created websites and our original money sites that we were trying to rank. And then we had to track which sites were linking to where, using what anchor tags, what kind of link, just so that everything could look natural in the eyes of Google. And then finally, there was QA and maintenance, which involved a whole laundry list of regular checks that needed to be performed on a consistent basis. And that ranged from monitoring that the sites were being indexed to the fact that they were running smoothly to making sure that we were consistently publishing new content to the sites and just all kinds of regular marketing activities that need to be performed. Now, imagine trying to coordinate all of that across hundreds of domains with multiple team members using nothing but a few basic spreadsheets to manage everything. That's where everything started to break down. And specifically, I noticed these five problems. The first problem was what I call the information treasure hunt. Nobody knew which spreadsheet had what. So a simple question like which domains need new content published could take an hour to answer easily. The team was spending more time hunting down information than actually doing the work. Problem number two was that there was no single source of truth because the information lived in multiple places. So an update in one spreadsheet did not necessarily reflect in another one. You might mark a domain as set up complete in one sheet, but in another sheet, it would still show up as in progress. So there was this conflicting information, duplicate work, and nobody actually knew what was accurate. Problem three was there was zero operational visibility. Management didn't have a bird's eye view of everything that was happening. So they couldn't answer basic questions like how many sites are actually live right now and which domains are stuck in setup. Basically, they were flying blind. Problem four was scattered communication. Task discussions were happening everywhere. So you had Slack messages, email threads, and sometimes even random comments that were buried in a spreadsheet cell. And when somebody needed context about why a decision got made or what happened with a specific domain, they had to go digging through all these different multiple platforms, and the context was just constantly getting lost. Finally, the fifth problem was this manual repetitive work. For example, every time a post was published, somebody had to manually update the content tracking sheet and then update a bunch of columns in the domain status sheet and then log it in the QA sheet and so on and so forth. So every week, hours were being wasted on data entry instead of strategic work. So it wasn't just inefficient, it was totally unsustainable. And that's exactly why I decided to migrate them to an Airtable database. What I built for this client was a centralized operations dashboard with relational databases, custom workflows, and automated task management, as well as visibility into everything that was happening across their entire network. So the solution wasn't just let's use Airtable instead of spreadsheets, it was redesigning the entire operational system from the ground up. So let me walk you through exactly how it works. Really, the foundation was this relational database architecture. Instead of five isolated spreadsheets, I created a set of interconnected tables with a domain table as the central hub where every domain had its core information. Then there were separate tables or spreadsheets for things like backlinks, team members, tasks, etc. So the main difference is that we create relationships between these tables. Like one domain may have many backlinks, or one task may have multiple team members. And what makes it so powerful is that when you update domain information in one place, it updates everywhere automatically. So that if you change a hosting provider in one table, that changes across every view, every task, and every report that references that domain. The next improvement was custom views for every role. So you have the same data, but you display it differently based on what you need to see. So let's say you're setting up new domains, we can create a view that only shows the columns that are relevant to that task. Let's say you're a manager and you need to see a bird's eye view of the content pipeline. Well, then we can create a view which shows exactly which domains need content and what stage of the process each domain is in. We also had a QA dashboard, which was visible only to certain members of the team, that would surface the domains that needed quality checks, and we could sort them by priority, for example. Managers also had a team workload view to see what each team member was assigned, who was overloaded, and who had capacity for more. So instead of everyone staring at the same massive spreadsheet, each person is seeing exactly the data they need for their role, and we're able to adjust the permissions based on that. The third massive improvement was centralizing communication. Now, with this system, every domain had its own record with a complete history. So team members could leave comments with context about decisions or issues they faced, and they can tag different colleagues when something needs attention. So they can also attach screenshots, documents, and files, and then see a complete timeline of what happened with this specific domain. So when somebody asked, why did we set it up this way, or what was the issue with that site last month, the answer is right there, and you don't have to go searching through Slack or email anymore. The fourth improvement is where things get really powerful. And personally, it's my favorite. I built in workflows that trigger automatically from the dashboard. So, for example, when a new domain gets added and a certain status is applied, tasks are automatically created and assigned to the right team members in our project management software, ClickUp. Another example, we used to want to keep track of how many posts were being published on each blog and what date that last post got published, so that then we could figure out which blogs needed fresh content. Before, our team would have to go in and manually check hundreds of domains and update these columns manually in the spreadsheet. Now, that whole process runs using automations. Every 24 hours, the system makes a request to the WordPress API for each domain, and it spits out the information that we need. Then we create a formula field which tells us whether the domain needs new content or not based on that last publication date. These are just two examples of how sophisticated the system can get and how it can really orchestrate multiple different platforms automatically, so that your team goes from spending hours on repetitive tasks to literally just clicking a button in some cases and having things magically finish.